If you're a fan of Shadow the Colossus-style battles, deep roguelike mechanics, and a story-rich RPG experience, this game might be exactly what you're looking for. But with breathtaking visuals, simple, straightforward combat, a world filled with overall mystery. Therefore, today I want to actually dive into Eternal Strands, this brand new action RPG, action adventure RPG that I feel was like shadow dropped by Xbox. Because bro, trust me, I did not see this game coming. It was definitely not on my radar, but for a while now I just had a feeling Xbox definitely has something like up their sleeves, and just out popped out of Eternal Strands, and we got it around the time of Xbox Developers Direct for 2025. So far since release, I've only spent quite a few hours with this so far, but Eternal Strands has already grabbed my attention with its unique art style full of like bright, vibrant colors and the Shadow of Colossus style boss fights. But let's dig in a bit deeper to see my overall initial impressions of Eternal Strands. Now, the gameplay loop of Eternal Strands is rather simple but adventurous. It revolves around going on expeditions with day and night cycles, showcasing the time during your play. Now, every time you leave the base, this begins your day time, which allows you to complete any quest that you need to get done. Depending on how many times you leave and come back to the base, you will keep pushing time forward. Now, I did notice I started off in the day, then with repeated visits back to the camp, the game did showcase that I now have moved from morning to afternoon, but as nighttime comes around, it is mainly your overall rest period. Now, these two major cycles can be seen as separate expeditions that you would travel on. This is how I feel like we get the roguelike feeling of this game due to how death or even repeated visits work. Now, the most annoying thing is dying. It honestly irritates the hell out of me because when you run into the fact that when you die, this is what I was saying, a little bit of roguelike parts into it, because when you die, you practically are losing all of your items that you found on your travels, right? But you can only keep 3, therefore losing the others. In between each expedition, you could also recover your health, but just as the days go on and death after death, you start to kind of get quite a bit annoyed, and you want to be a little bit more cautious when it comes to having these fights with these enemies. Now, one thing to also take note is that even though that you're going to be dealing with a lot of death, and not as much as crazy as you would think like Dark Souls level of death, but just a decent amount where you would start noticing it, the world also has different condition changes when it comes to like your weather. So you get extreme weather, because you would also note that when you are in extreme cold, you take damage and your character slows down. But when you're in fire, you start taking, of course, fire damage, because you're technically burning. Not technically, you are burning, but even creatures can also change locations and sometimes even swap out different creatures. So you can't also remember or memorize each run. Like every time you die or go back to the base camp, it kind of changes a couple of things out. Not enough where it's super crazy, but just enough where you're like, okay, this is a bit different, or this was one less enemy or one more enemy. So you start to run into that as well. But one thing I do want to take note is, of course, our beautiful female protagonist, Bryn. This lovely warrior can wield magic through the power of weaving. She channels her magic woven through different mantles and by controlling the different strands of magic. And overall, I'm really enjoying the spell casting. Like, we can cast spells like Weaver's Grasp, which is a telekinesis power that allows you to lift and move objects. You can also do Ice Wall that casts ice magic that is pretty good at controlling fights with multiple enemies, or even just something as simple as freezing one enemy in place. Then that allows you to get a couple free shots in, or just overall just controlling the battlefield. Now, of course, for any of my World of Warcraft fans out there, we already understand what CC looks like, and this is just a small little snippet that Bryn can be able to do. Now, the world does have plenty amounts of exploring that honestly really caught my eye on how the devs got this art style down pack, and I really just can't get over the art style. So I'll be talking a little bit about that later. But there are also different biomes that you can explore. Each one just really shows the devs put a lot of time into their art, and this is where I see the passion and the potential that Yellow Brick Games have, just for the way they just found a way to just put something that was probably in their head, put it out on paper, and make it look as good as this game. But while you are exploring the beautiful biomes, we gotta talk about the creatures that you will come across on your expeditions. Now, let's talk about combat, right? Combat in this game is, like I said in the beginning of this video, it is rather simple and straightforward. It's not super hyper type combat like most action games, but it's not also too simple where you don't have to stay on your toes, because trust me and believe, these enemies will make you stand on your toes. As time goes on, they increasingly get a little bit more difficult or add a bit of a challenge, and you got to kind of like understand like all of your options that you have available. Speaking about those options, we get to Bryn, right? She fights with magic and melee weapons. So far, I have played with her bow and arrow and her sword and shield, as well as utilizing her ice wall magic and her telekinesis magic as well. Now, combat is quite simple with a dodge and a block, but you kind of got to rinse and repeat with this. I think most of the exciting bits of fighting is when you are actually using the magic. I feel like that is really much the main focus that Yellow Brick Games kind of put into, is the overall styles of magic and adding that to the repertoire, because just the overall sword and shield, just it feels off, feels a bit janky, like it's a not like super important that I see. But I also think the most hyped, exciting things about Eternal Strands is the overall boss fights. Just being able to climb the bosses and have this style of, like I said earlier, Shadow Colossus-style battles is so nostalgic, because I fucking loved Shadow Colossus. And when I fight these bosses, it just screams Colossus. Now, I do just hope there's no plot twist like it, and like how it is in Colossus. If you know what I'm referencing, then let me know in the comment section below, because there is a plot twist in that game. I don't want to ruin it for nobody, but I hope to God, if by the time I'm done beating Eternal Strands, that is not something similar. So another major mechanic is also climbing, which goes back to that Shadow Colossus point that I just made. Having moments of needing to weaken, you know, the giants by targeting weak points of each part of the body while also trying to hang on to them. You can climb vertically to get to different points. Like, it has, the world map has a verticality to it with also a nice horizontal plane as well. So it really plays into that action adventure style that they're going for, just being able to climb, and of course using the climbing mechanic to actually climb on the bosses and deal damage to them. Now, Eternal Strands is also story first, gameplay second. With how good these cutscenes were, and of course your personality can actually change how characters see you in game, but during conversations you can have different dialogue options that will help shape Bryn's character over the course of the game. I love how the game explains what emotions you're trying to convey by giving you the story dialogue while also explaining what exactly that feeling is trying to portray. That is one of my favorite things about this game, because I feel like games like this needs to do it just a little bit more, just a tiny bit, because I hate when I'm doing dialogue options and they say something, but the way you thought it meant and what they say after the fact is completely two different things. I am looking at you, The Walking Dead, Telltale's games. A lot of some of the things that be said in RPGs could, or even sometimes some of the Fallout games, like it would give you the text of what it would say, but the character would say something like, okay, it did not fit the vibe of the given text that they're trying to give you. So that's my little tangent about why I like what Yellow Brick Games done with how they did with the dialogue options. But I do got a couple of positive feedback that I want to give credit where credit is due to Yellow Brick Games. Right off the bat, what stands out to me is the visuals. The graphics are really good. I love how the animation is quite colorful. Feels like I'm watching a Netflix animation series. I love how the cast of characters is very vastly different and colorful in their own way. Like, there's a lot of personalities throughout the cast. The cutscenes play out in a whole cinematic animation similar to other media like Arcane or Spider-Verse or even sometimes anime. You also get the 2D PNG conversation points as well, which kind of fits the vibe that they're getting for. Like, I had a feeling this game was going to have those type, but it's just basically where there's a 2D image appears on the screen and the characters are talking. The voice acting as well fits each character. Like I said, each personality, each voice really hits home to each of the characters that are inside of your party. I like the blend of each way to also help further move the story along, but I'm also just really impressed with some of the story so far. Even in my early hours playing, I'm currently invested in seeing the continuation of Bryn's journey, being the new captain of her caravan. The characters are by far some of my favorites. I love how they all interact with each other, and I love how they all have their moments of like talking bits where you get to kind of know them a little bit more, and some of them are actually trying to come down with the feeling that you are now the new captain. That's a little bit of story bit that you kind of know when very first thing in the beginning of the game. And also the fact that we also need to save our original home, but also dealing with the effects of the tangle, which is this thick fog that blocks some areas and can also kill you, which they definitely utilize that fog in game, like in engine gameplay, as well as in the story bit, because one of your main characters get injured by this said fog in a cutscene. Now, another thing I do appreciate is the reactivity of the world, because we can use Weaver's Grasp and advanced ice magic to do like real-time destruction, which allows for crazy reactivity moments in combat. And we can also toss burning tree trunks at enemies with the telekinetic powers. We can take pieces of trees to block opposing fire, or even block the fire with ice walls to stop it as well. But now I do have quite a few small complaints, like the lack of inventory space and the jankiness of the combat due to the controls just feeling off. However, I will say this is an indie game, as well as Yellow Brick Games' debut title at that. So even though the combat is not the greatest, making some fights feel like a chore, the inventory space could be increased to really stop me from having going back and forth from the base camp to all where you left off in your expedition to continue exploring. Now, overall, my first impressions of Eternal Strands are definitely positive. I'm quite excited to see how the game finishes, but I'm more excited to see what's next for the indie team. After playing through Eternal Strands, this just shows they have a passion and potential to make great games for the future. This game continues to drive home the fact that indie dev teams with passion back in them can make some fucking great games. Even though with a smaller team, they can be prone to some mess ups, but they did knock it out the park with how this game's story, animation, and combat, if they tweak it just a little bit. I feel like if they just a little bit smoother, not as janky, the combat could be definitely better, but the story, animation, and overall gameplay loop is definitely something that's very fun. If they can just fix a little bit of that combat, and the inventory space, I think this game can definitely be a good contender. This game is a hot $40, so I would like to know, what are your thoughts on Eternal Strands? Let me know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to sub to the channel to join the chillest chaotic crew on YouTube, and like the video for more coverage on your favorite games. As always, stay safe out there, and it's been your host, KICTV, signing out. Peace.